Hello everyone, this is Ryan with Frontline Animal Removal. Today I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about mice. Mices, mouse, whatever you want to call them. Vermin, rodents. One of my most common calls, complaints, or need to inspect is for scratching. So we get a lot of these calls where someone's hearing noises and they hear a scratching sound. Now, a scratching sound could be squirrel.
In 1/4 mile, turn left.
It could be bat, it could be bird, it could be a lot of things. But a lot of times, the scratching sound is mice. And so I want to give you some tips on how to maybe help determine if you have a mouse problem. Now, why am I telling you about mice, even though we don't do mice? Well, these inspections take time to, do. We spend, an hour or so going through the house, trying to find wildlife issues, and all we come up with mice. And the problem for that with me is I tend to disappoint the customer and saying, sorry, you don't have a problem with raccoons. Sorry, you don't have a problem with squirrels. You have mice. Which isn't as bad as squirrels and raccoons, but weirdly, a lot of people are disappointed when they find out they don't have a wildlife problem. I find it very entertaining, but sometimes they're very relieved that it's just a minor thing. But here's some tips when it comes to trying to determine the sounds that you hear and what animal they correlate to. So if you hear a faint scratching sound that's isolated, so let's pretend you're laying in bed and it's late at night and you hear a faint scratching in the corner. And then the next night you hear a faint scratching in the corner. And then maybe the following week you hear a faint scratching in the corner. Maybe it's not faint, maybe it's a loud scratching. And it goes on for long periods of time. But the scratching is always in the same place. It's always in the corner, or it's always down on the wall, or it's right in the middle of the ceiling. But the scratching is always in the same location. Or maybe you have 3 locations you hear the scratching, but it's only those locations. And the scratching is consistent. It happens regularly. And it goes on for long periods of time, but always in the same locations. Well, those sounds are usually associated with mice. And that scratching sound is not actually the animal scratching around, it's actually the animal feeding. Because mice are hoarding animals, and they bring in food into the structure. So they'll bring in acorns, they'll bring in maybe they'll able to bring in some small walnuts. They'll bring in birdseed from nearby bird feeders. They'll bring in corn from cornfields. They'll bring in seeds from the plants in your yard and seeds from the trees. They'll eat maple seeds, the little helicopters that fall out. Whatever that they can digest, they'll bring it into the house. They'll form caches of food. And then when they're hungry, they go to that pile of food, and then they'll chow down for long periods of time. And that scratching sound is actually the sound of the mouse chewing on its food. So if you consistently get this sound, you probably have mice, and you'd be best off contacting a local pest control guy. Because I don't trap mice, I don't put out poison for mice. I do wildlife. I do everything bigger than wildlife. But let's say the sound is different. Let's say you can hear the animal go across the ceiling. Or you can hear the animal go from one side of the room to the other. And it's quite loud. That's a pretty good indication you might have a wild animal up there. Because the sound is moving around. I like it when a customer says to me, well, when I lay in bed at night, I can hear the animal start in this corner, and then I can hear it run to the other side of the room. Well, that's good news to me, because that means I'm at the right house to do the right kind of work. Another sound that I like to hear my customers explained to me is the sound of shuffling. When raccoons move around in the attic and they're walking on the ceiling, they tend to make a shuffling sound. That shuffling sound can go on for long periods of time, but generally what you're hearing with that shuffling sound is the animal is pushing through the insulation to get down to the drywall, and they're moving that insulation around to perhaps make a cozy spot to sleep, get a little bed, or they're just pushing it around to make it easier to walk around the attic. That shuffling sound usually doesn't last a not a real long period of time, but you can hear it moving around, and it's just it'll happen every night or every couple of nights, and it's very consistent. Another sound that is very consistent with wild animals is usually in the eaves. If you have aluminum soffit, it's loud, because when those squirrels run back and forth that aluminum soffit, it sounds like a herd of elephants running above your head along the outer wall. And then, like, if you have the aluminum soffit and you have raccoons in there, you can hear the panels buckling as they walk along. That aluminum flex, kind of like a pop can. You know how a pop candy kind of makes a little crinkling sound when you squeeze it? Well, that's aluminum soffit. You know, you can hear it buckling a little bit as they walk. That's another good indication you got wild animals. If you have vinyl soffit, the sound is a little more muffled, but it's still pretty loud when a squirrel or a raccoon travels through there. You get more of a creaking sound when the raccoons are traveling with soffit, because the plastic rubs, all the joints are rubbing together, and it makes kind of a creaking sound, not so much a buckling sound. But squirrels are just loud. I mean,